The movement to confront the AIDS epidemic, as well as the movement to confront our society's inequities broadly, is etched into the fabric of San Francisco, and for that matter, the nation as a whole. Scientists, activists, and people living with HIV confronted political and public health leaders with demands for treatment folks deserve, while tirelessly fighting for better, more equitable health and governmental outcomes. 40 years later, we stand on the shoulders of trailblazers who understood that every person deserves empathy and care regardless of their health conditions, skin color, or sexuality. Even now, we see the lingering effects of discrimination against those with HIV and AIDS in our healthcare delivery system. It's why I was proud to sign a number of bills, but notably one included last year that bans insurers from discriminating against people specifically for living with HIV. And while we've collectively made progress, we, by definition, have to continue to do more to improve. This current pandemic has shown us that health inequities still exist, and it's up to each and every one of us to continue the fight and never, ever accept the status quo. Every single one of you and those that came before you are heroes that have changed the course of history for the better. There's more work to be done, and I'm happy to be a partner with each and every one of you. Thanks for having me, and it's been an honor to address you today.
Let us pray. We know now that HIV cannot be contracted through the sharing of gods. So today we call in as many faith traditions as are sewn together here today in this quilt. We know now that HIV is not transmitted through the telling of stories. So today we will not leave it up to history to tell, erase, diminish, or leave them out of their own stories. And we know now that to call their names does not put us in a high-risk category. God, today, we call you by all the names. You are the God seen in the face of everyone who was dying and died of AIDS. You are the God of the many people who missed advances in medicine by 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, and even 1 day that could have changed their death sentence into a manageable and chronic illness. You are the God that takes on stigma, the barriers, and the nihilism. You are the God that tells us that HIV and AIDS were never meant to be divine retribution, but instead have always been an opportunity to show radical, transformative, divine, and inclusive care and love. And finally, beloved, this is a prayer for every man, woman, and child who died from AIDS. Let us exhume and redeem their stories with a knowing that nothing they ate, nothing they did, nothing they said, no one they loved, no one they trusted, nothing they forgot, or nothing they drank or smoked can keep them from their God. And that God, in God's dispersal and dispensing of God's love, has always been saying that HIV and AIDS must remind us not to love less, but to love more. In the many names of God that translate into love, amen, hallelujah, right on, shalom, salam, namaste, and ashe. And now a moment of silence.
Thank you, Messengers of Hope Choir, for the inspiring rendition in choral. Please, thank you so much. Good morning. Before I begin my formal remarks, I feel it is important that I acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original peoples of this place we call San Francisco. We are honored to have the AIDS Memorial on Ohlone ancestral land. We acknowledge their elders, both past and present, and the future generations to come. May we bring forth these two powerful spirits, that of the Ohlone people and that of the AIDS community. Please join me in a moment of silence as we remember those in our hearts and the nearly 750,000 Americans that we have lost. I certainly feel their spirit here today, with the beauty of the sun and the nature and the birds and each of you. My name is John Cunningham, and I'm a man living with AIDS. And I am honored to lead the National AIDS Memorial. It is so, so, so special to see all of you here in this sanctuary after the last 15 months of battle. I would like to invite anyone living with HIV or AIDS to stand or raise your hand and be acknowledged. I want to thank some very special guests who are here with us today. Of course, our beloved Speaker of the House, longtime friend of the memorial, champion and advocate for the AIDS crisis, who gave a voice to AIDS at a time when there was silence. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, thank you. We're also joined by Representative Barbara Lee, who has fought on the front lines for so long, making sure that the necessary steps were taken in Congress to ensure that those in need of care and support were given such care, and founding member and co-chair of the HIV/AIDS caucus, Representative Lee. I remember the last time that we had a mayor with us here, and it was Mayor Lee. And may Mayor Lee's spirit and strength be with us today. But we are honored to have San Francisco Mayor London Breed, whose leadership has helped this city through the last 15 months to have not become crushed by the COVID pandemic. Mayor Lee, welcome. Mayor Breed, I'm sorry. I also want to invite and thank all longtime friends of the memorial, philanthropist, LGBT ambassador, the first LGBT ambassador, James Hormel, and his husband, Michael. Jim. And more elected officials than we can shake a stick at today. Welcome. All dignitaries, all elected officials, all long-term survivors, all caregivers, all service providers, all activists, all medical and scientific community, and all of you who are watching remotely from home. I also want to thank our partners who helped make today possible. Gilead Sciences, Quest Diagnostics, Chevron, Vivent Health, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and Equality California. Thank you so much for your longstanding support and leadership. This morning, as we gather in the beauty of this sanctuary, surrounded by the power of the Quilt, which we just completed an installation system that will allow this to take place into the future for gatherings and events, I cannot help but reflect back over the last 4 decades and the journey that so many of us have traveled together. The last year for many of us has brought to the fore incredibly painful memories of loss and struggle. As a memorial, the Grove and the Quilt will forever be called upon to tell the story of the AIDS crisis to future generations. I am reminded of the quote by AIDS activist Vito Russo. Remember that someday the AIDS crisis will be over. And when that day has come and gone, there will be people alive who will hear that once there was a terrible disease and that a brave group of people stood up and fought and in some cases died so others might live and be free. I believe that this quote is both a tribute to the work we have done, but it is also a call to action, for far too much work is still to be done. Over the last year, the curtain has been pulled back on the tragedy of the AIDS crisis, and it has revealed both progress and parallels of unfinished work. The work so many of us have been involved in over the last 4 decades has provided so much to those combating COVID-19, from virological research to testing to treatment to vaccine. The fact that the vaccine was rooted in research of the AIDS crisis and through mRNA research, that may now revert back to help create a vaccine for HIV and AIDS. All of us today who are sitting here vaccinated, having received that shot of hope owe that to the AIDS crisis, because the emergency use authorization was born out of the AIDS crisis. Behind the curtain, we also confront the continued inequities in our healthcare system, primarily impacting communities of color, the lack of a strong and prepared public health system to respond effectively to a global health crisis, deep-seated stigma, prejudice, discrimination, and otherism. We who have battled over the years know the antidote to this resides in activism, compassion, love, and also, as Speaker Pelosi often says, to know one's own power. Our work is not over, and we must share the lessons of justice and humanity with those who follow us. Although we have a responsibility to future generations, we also must ensure that those who have battled and struggled and still struggle today with the effects of HIV and AIDS, that they are honored and supported in this time of need. Today is HIV Long-Term Survivors Awareness Day. At the top of these stairs, there is a large boulder which was dedicated on World AIDS Day 2017, when we were blessed to have President Clinton with us. And on it resides a quote that I believe speaks to the long-term survivors' struggle. We must continue to work together as a nation to further our progress against this deadly epidemic. And while we do so, we must remember that every person who is living with HIV or AIDS is someone's son or daughter, brother or sister or parent or grandparent. They deserve our love, they deserve our respect, and they need our support. I want all long-term survivors here today and that are watching from home to know that the National AIDS Memorial and myself personally see you and support you. We must support the long-term survivors community. It is now my deep honor to introduce our mayor, the Honorable London Breed.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much for your leadership on what is the 40th anniversary since the federal government first recognized HIV/AIDS in this country. You know, this pandemic has been very challenging, and this crisis in the late 70s, early 80s of HIV/AIDS taught us so much about how we handled this current pandemic. In fact, you have heard references to how San Francisco was left on our own, how challenging it was as we watched the federal government continue to ignore this city. And aren't we so grateful and proud to have two amazing champions in Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congresswoman Barbara Lee leading the charge in Congress. San Francisco was left on our own, but we did what San Franciscans do best. We came together. We came together and provided things to address this crisis like no other. One of the second AIDS centers was established here in San Francisco. In fact, the system of care that was developed to help those struggling with HIV/AIDS was developed right here in San Francisco. The research, the renowned research that continues to this very day was established right here in our great city. And we are so proud and grateful to have Cleve Jones with us, who established the AIDS Memorial Quilts, which have taken off all over the world to remember and acknowledge those lost lives during this battle. We remember we are proud San Franciscans. And through the tragedy, through the crisis, there's hope. There's hope because in 2014, when I served on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors with our now state senator, Scott Wiener, we established the Getting to Zero campaign. 0 new infections, 0 new death, 0 stigma attached to those who have HIV or AIDS. And for the first time in a very long time, in 2019, we saw only 166 new infections of HIV, and that is really historic for the work that we're doing in investing in PrEP and investing in PEP and investing in the things that are gonna truly get us to 0 new infections. I have hope for the future. We've weathered the storms in this city before. Whether it's earthquakes and fires, the HIV/AIDS epidemic, the COVID pandemic, and look at where we are here today in this beautiful grove, honoring the people that so many of you loved, recognizing that the work still needs to be done to make sure that as we move towards the future, that we continue to not see more lives lost to this challenging disease. And to those of you brave enough to tell your stories and to stand up and to be recognized, those of you who are currently living with HIV, we appreciate you telling your stories and helping us to know that there is still work to be done. We are grateful to be here, to honor the lives lost, and to look forward to the future, a very hopeful future with the leadership we have here, with the work we're going to continue to do in order to get to a place where there are 0 new infections and 0 deaths because of this disease. And we are grateful to have you all join us here today. So thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to introduce someone who has been an incredible champion. In fact, his leadership when cuts had been made in the past to federal funding, to HIV/AIDS support here in San Francisco. He has led that charge. Supervisor Mandelman has picked up that charge, and I will continue to make sure that the cuts are continued to be backfilled so that we can continue with the important work and research we need to do. And the leader of those efforts for so many years is now fighting for us in the state. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome State Senator Scott Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can we just hear it again for our mayor and her leadership during this pandemic? Makes me very proud once again to be a San Franciscan, as always. So I came of age as a gay man, as a 17-year-old in 1987, which was a terrifying time. There was no treatment for this virus. There was no PrEP. There was fear, there was lack of knowledge. It had only been 2 years since we even had a test for this virus. And it was a scary time to come of age as a gay man. And it was a time when our federal government had abandoned us because this virus was impacting, who was it impacting? Gay and bisexual men, trans women, black people, people using drugs, sex workers. All of us considered disposable, throwaway people by our federal government and by this society. But this community pulled together and survived. Not everyone survived. We know tens of millions of people have died from this virus. But we were able to come through this, and we now have effective treatments. We now have PrEP. We now have support systems. But let's never forget that the challenges are still with us. And we want to make sure that this quilt, as beautiful as it is, stops growing. That is the goal. And in 2019, millions of people became infected. In 2020, millions of people became infected. We're still losing to people, almost 1 million people a year worldwide dying from HIV still today. And we know that so many people lack access to the medication, lack access to PrEP. So many people living with HIV lack access to housing. We're continuing to lose people. We continue to criminalize HIV throughout this country, and I want to thank Congresswoman Barbara Lee for partnering with us to end the criminalization of HIV in the state of California, and we need to take that national. And we need to make sure that our young people continue to deeply understand that this plague, this pandemic, is still very much with us. We have done such great work in San Francisco, and we live in a little bit of a bubble, a beautiful bubble. And we need to take the work that we've done here in San Francisco to collapse HIV infections and bring that work to the Central Valley, to Alabama, to Africa, to Asia, to Eastern Europe, and everywhere else where so many people are dying of HIV. And our young people of every community, they're the future, and they're going to carry the torch from us to fight to end HIV once and for all, to make sure that every person living with this virus is living with dignity and health and success in life, and to make sure that the infections stop. And so we must work with our young people to make sure that they understand the history of what has come before, and that they are prepared to carry on this fight to a brighter future, and I know that's going to happen. I want to thank the AIDS Memorial. This is just so beautiful. John, thank you for everything that you and your board do to just keep this amazing project moving forward. So thank you. And it's now my pleasure to invite up Eric Johnson, the Executive Director of the Western Region of Quest Diagnostics. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Johnson, and I am proud to represent Quest Diagnostics here today. Quest Diagnostics is honored to support National AIDS Memorial year after year. and to join them into doing our part in the local community to help raise awareness around HIV and AIDS. As we continue to build our relationship and seek to expand our connections with you all, the surround sound we are creating as a community is growing exponentially. We support National AIDS Memorial's mission and programs, leading the charge in raising awareness around HIV and AIDS, including the importance of testing. The CDC still estimates that 1 in every 7 Americans living with HIV in the U.S. do not know they are infected. That means that there are still far too many people who have not yet been diagnosed and are not yet receiving treatment so that they can live a long and healthy life. At Quest, we believe that knowing is the first step towards better health. We often talk about the power of testing to illuminate answers and to allow people to take action from those insights. We know that testing is the first step of many in helping end the epidemic, and that there's power in aligning ourselves with others who are working towards a common cause to make an even bigger impact. That powerful story cannot have become clearer than in the past year and a half during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our nation experienced some of those same issues that were prevalent during the height of the AIDS epidemic: loss of life, health inequality, impact on marginal communities and people of color. That same AIDS service organizations who were on the front lines then stepped forward again to help those communities during COVID and provide essential services and care. Quest Diagnostics joined them on that front line with critical diagnostic and testing services, providing as much as 50% of the nation's testing capability in the early days to help reduce the spread and ensure health of patients in need of care in the communities across the country. And looking to build critical relationships and trust in those marginalized communities, we've introduced Quest for Health Equity, a Quest Diagnostics initiative that seeks to ensure equitable health care for all. Our mission is to close the healthcare disparity gap among the underserved, with an emphasis on the importance of testing as a tool to direct care. And seeking opportunities to distribute this fund, I've had the privilege of working with healthcare workers with direct frontline knowledge of just those issues we're seeking to address. Those interactions provide me with an abundance of optimism for the future. There are so many young, passionate people seeking to make a substantial difference in their communities. Their voices are loud and are being heard. When we look to that future, I think we can all feel the collective power of bringing people together for a common cause. Today gives us a chance to reflect on the changes we've driven together in the past year, but also serves as an opportunity to recommit to this important cause as we pivot away from COVID-19. As was the case with HIV/AIDS, it was young people like Pedro Zamora, Mary Bowman, and other activists who rose up to change the hearts, minds, and the world as we knew it. It is my honor to introduce 2 of these upcoming leaders. Diawari is the first recipient of the National AIDS Memorial Mary Bowman Arts and Activism Award. I would also like to introduce Antwan Matthews, a Pedro Zamora scholar and National AIDS Memorial Board member. They are truly amazing trailblazers and are here to share a spoken word performance they have created for today.
Hello, my name is Diawari. It's an honor for us to be here today. I'm the inaugural recipient of the Mary Bowman Arts and Activism Award, and I just want to say that this is such a pleasure to share this moment with all of you that are here today and all of us that are joining from the spirit realm. I want us to take a second to take a deep breath. Everybody that's here, you know, we forget to breathe all the time. So for a long time, we've all probably been holding our breath because this has been, you know, a challenging world to be a part of, no matter when you were born, how long you've been here, what you've been going through. So I think it's important that we all just remember that breathing is a part of this experience as well. And as long as we've been holding our breath, it's time for us to start breathing again.
Here's our poem, If I Say. If I say I can't breathe, I mean that. When I say I'm having complications with my pregnancy, believe that. I'm struggling to define my body as divine. Can't you see that? Systems steady try to break me down, say I'm wrong, say I'm worthless. But without our bodies on this land, this world will be earthless. Sorry. This is a big moment right now. I'm sorry right now.
No apologies. We're right here with you. Right? Isn't this part of life? You got that.
What you know about courage? I'm rising above the cynics. What you know about love? I'm rising above the critics. My body is my house, and I embrace that. I stand against the world when they try to break that. Understanding that our life is different, understanding what it means to be in this moment. Let us breathe, let us breathe. We are life, we are free. Dear officials, we are not broken, therefore you cannot fix it. Those pharmaceutical companies certainly cannot diss it. If I decide to give up, it's on my own terms. Let that be known. My body is my house, and these are the things that I own. Let us breathe, let us breathe. We are life, we are free. Our bodies are our houses, and they deserve to just be. If I say I can't breathe, I mean that.
Say I got wings on my back. Best believe that. 'Cause these angels have been drooping to the ground, praying for something profound to lift them to the skies again. What's the prize again? What's the price again? Where are my eyes again? I'm lost in the race. Get a job, find a pace. Watch your life pass you by like that warm piece of pie you're so hungry for you swallow in one bite. Hold this fight in the palm of my hands. Call it love. Call him my man. But these screams are never heard in the light. Oh, y'all delight in our bodies. But this is my house, my cocoon, my attic, my space to be restless, my world to be dramatic. Trying to line up our bodies like we're not here to fly? These houses weightless, stateless, more than you can deny. Who cares for dead presidents? How about living residents? You call us alien? Ain't that some mania? If I say I can't breathe, I mean that. No need to apologize if you can't see that. We need the violence to end. Not in the streets, in our beds, in our doctors, in our heads, in our schools, in our friends, in the never-ending Fed.
Pockets say I can't breathe, and they mean that.
You want to make $1 million off your million, and I just can't believe that. Because $1 million could feed, $1 million could lead, $1 million could be so much more than just another dollar for your worries. Let's leave behind the hurry, 'cause an angel named Mary once said to live now, to live proud, and to always carry our bodies with patience.
Her body was killed for renovations to feed our nation.
More than that million ever could, more than that billion ever would, more than that trillion ever should. Leave those dollars deep in the ground. Find another way for the world to go round. Hold our people higher than their lows, higher than their glow, higher than we will go if I say I can't breathe. And I mean that. Thank you.
It is now my honor to introduce Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
First, thank you, John, so much for that introduction, but also thank you for your work and for bringing us here today. First, I just have to say to Ima and Antwan, thank you for reminding us about our lives and why we live. You both are amazing, and we're so proud of you. Thank you. John, what a remarkable moment we're in today. And I want to thank the National AIDS Memorial, of course, Cleve, a co-founder of the AIDS Memorial Quilt, for your very important work and mission to always remember to bring hope and healing. And a special thank you to all of our elected officials and everyone taking part in this very momentous occasion. Of course, to Mayor Breeden, I just have to say to you, thank you so much for really charting the course, not only for San Francisco, but for the rest of the country, and how to, as Speaker Pelosi says, crush this virus. Thank you for leading in your leadership. And to the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, who has dedicated her life, quite frankly, before she was elected to office, and now as our Speaker, in service to getting us to zero. Thank you so much, Speaker Pelosi. We'd never be able to get there without you, never. And to all of you at home, all of you here who have fought so hard to end this epidemic, you know, I know that we will because of you, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. The quilt and this grove have touched so many hearts, and it's so powerful just to be here. June 5th, 2021 marks the 40th anniversary since the Center for Disease Control's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report described the first 5 cases of what later became known as AIDS. And so, yes, we're here today to remember all of those we have lost over the last 40 years. Many of us, many of you have been in this fight since then. But we're also here to reflect on the progresses that we've made and recommit ourselves to this work. Let us remember those who have fought on the front lines, stood up for dignity, for health, for social justice, and for an end to discrimination. And yes, as John mentioned, I'm the co-founder and co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional HIV/AIDS Caucus, and I serve on the Appropriations Committee. And I just want to tell you that ending HIV and AIDS by 2030 continue to be a priority for me. We will get there.
On a day like today, the obvious needs to be stated, and we all need to thank Gilead Science. They make the drugs and they deliver the medications that save our patients' lives, that save the lives of our friends, and that save the lives of our loved ones and our family members. They help life triumph over death. Thank you, Gilead. My name is Mike Gifford, and I'm proud to serve as the President and Chief Executive Officer of Vivent Health, America's only HIV medical home recognized by the federal government. We are proud to provide comprehensive HIV prevention, care, and treatment services to tens of thousands of people all across this great country who rely on us for their very lives. As we gather here today, let our resilience be as strong as ever. Let us remember all those who we have lost, and let us celebrate all those who continue to fight on, knowing that they've made wonderful commitments and wonderful contributions that have allowed our world to be a better place. But beyond resilience, let us recommit to advancing the powerful movement which they first began. A powerful movement of community and courageous political leaders that demanded that the government be held accountable for caring for people with HIV rather than ignoring them, or worse yet, banishing them to the edges of our society. Let us continue that movement that achieved the advancements, achieved the movement of scientific advancements to be translated into real-life treatments more quickly. And now let's make sure that that includes vaccines for HIV. It's been 42 long years for a vaccine for this disease. Let us continue that movement that created aggressive and effective mental health prevention and public health programs that saved lives that are now being repealed, especially clean needle exchange programs being repealed across this country. That can't happen. More lives will be lost. And let us continue that movement that dared to redefine healthcare and put the patient, people with HIV, at the center of every single decision that is made. That movement changed how healthcare is provided in this country, and unfortunately it is under attack by health insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers who are trying to substitute the best healthcare for the best economics. We can't let that happen. It's called discriminatory reimbursement. Imagine that. Discrimination in the fight against AIDS 40 years after the first cases were ever reported. That movement helped create Vivent Health, a national model of care that provides care to everybody living with HIV, achieves the finest clinical outcomes known to humankind, and this year we surpassed $100 million in cutting of healthcare costs through our unique HIV medical home model of care. That movement that we recommit to today helped achieve recognition and acceptance and inclusion and equality for the LGBT community, and let us redouble that movement to end systemic racism in this country that fuels the HIV pandemic. Let us break the bonds of 21st bondage that too many of our black and brown friends face. That movement uses the beauty of this place, the Grove, and the love stitched in these quilts to assure we always remember and never relive the carnage of AIDS. Vivent Health is so proud to be the national community partner of the AIDS quilt, and we are so grateful, John, for your leadership and the work of your team that assures that nobody ever forget the AIDS pandemic. That resilience that I've talked about, that powerful movement, is best embodied by people living with HIV and AIDS, and I am thrilled to introduce to you our next speaker, Lonnie Payne. Lonnie is a member of the National AIDS Memorial Board of Directors, a long-term survivor, and an inspiration to us all. Please welcome Lonnie Payne.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Really? That's all I hear? Let's try this one more time. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I love your energy. So, my name is Lonnie Payne Clark, and I am a longtime survivor of AIDS. In 1981, the first cases of HIV/AIDS were reported by the CDC in the United States. 10 years later, this grove in which we gather was created, a 10-acre space that is now known as the National AIDS Memorial. Together, we join today in reflection upon both of these milestones. I can't help but think about what life looked like for me 41 years ago. And 41 years ago, my life partner, Joel Swineby, and I moved from Chicago. The next year, my identical twin, Lawrence, and his partner, Timothy Bollinger, moved from Chicago as well. We were all very much aware by the mid-1980s of a very insidious disease that was impacting our community with our friends. That illness was, of course, HIV and AIDS. Back in those dark days, we decided to go as a family to the health center in the Castro and to be tested for HIV. Like so many of you here will understand, we received information that was devastating. We all found out that we were HIV positive during that visit. So my first 4 years was very interesting because we were using that time to look for knowledge. We were watching, we were taking care of, and ultimately grieving the loss of many of our friends, our family, and our family members. This decade was also personally devastating for me because of two reasons. The first reason was we all developed opportunistic infections and diseases. Those AIDS-defining diseases led to the deaths of Lawrence, Tim, and Joel by 1996. The second reason was that I was told that I would be dead by the end of 1996. Let's do some math. That was 1996. Look at where we are today. This grove was vital to me during those dark moments. There were many times when I was coping with my own illness, the loss of others, that I found myself drawn to this remarkable natural space. And boy, just looking at it today with the quilt panels and all of the trees, it's just lovely. I mean, this is life in this grove. Back then even, this place was a remarkable place of solace. I'm confident that there are those of you here today who also remember some of those times and probably use this grove for the very same reason that I did. What has sustained me over the following years has been my sense of purpose. That purpose was to continue to help others. In the mid-90s, when my brother, his partner, and my life partner were in their final days, my purpose was to provide comfort to them. With so much loss during that time, during the 90s, I could have said, okay, it's over. I'm ready to die. I mean, I've lost my family, my friends are dying. What the heck am I still around? But you know what happened? Protease inhibitors. Protease inhibitors. I was around when they started working. You know, I heard Billy Porter the other day, and this I'm going off of my little speech for a moment. I heard Billy Porter talking about in 1996, the antiretrovirals started. But that was such a lie, because a lot of us were doing antiretrovirals in the 80s. We were taking any drug we could get our hand on because we wanted to stay alive. So I just want to be sure that everyone's clear. Some of you youngsters, you know, you hear the horror stories about some of the antiretrovirals. I'm living proof that they worked. So, and that's no shade to Billy Porter. You know, that's no shade to Billy Porter. But what that did was my health started improving. Eric Chisul, I just saw your laugh. Yeah, I just saw your laugh. I realized that I had a new purpose, and that purpose was to continue to help others. I did that by volunteering with the HIV/AIDS hotline, talking with people who were newly diagnosed or who were afraid that they might become infected. My purpose was to remind them that AIDS was not a death sentence. My purpose was to help them find ways not to become infected. My purpose was to tell them that you could enjoy your sexuality without becoming infected and without infecting others. My purpose was to remind them that they were loved. I choose to live my life to the fullest to honor those whose lives that were cut short by AIDS. As a 35-year survivor of AIDS, I am now witnessing what it is like to be a senior citizen. Really? I'm getting a laugh on that one. I got it. The problems of the elderly are my new purpose. Cancer, dementia, frailties that we all witnessed due to AIDS are now the frailties of growing old. What is my purpose now, you might ask? It is to continue to grow old with dignity. It is to Thank you. It is to accept the steadfast love and support of my family, the Swanbys. Joel's parents, Julius and Ethel Swanby, accepted me fully into their life 4.5 decades ago. Joel's brother Mark, his wife Tony, and my niece Melanie are here in the Grove today. And I want you guys to stand. I know where you are. Come on. There you go. And of course, Orion, I see you. My grandnephew is there. Hey, Orion. So I have this amazing family. And not only is this family amazing, after Joel died, and I met my husband, Bruce, who's also over there, they accepted him into our family as well. So even though I say my name is Lonnie Payne Clark, my name's really Lonnie Payne Clark Swanby. I acknowledge the joy all around me. I provide light and unconditional love to my friends and the people I encounter, not darkness, not despair. I continue to share my light to tell the stories of Joel, Lawrence, and Tim, and the stories of others impacted by this horrendous disease. Simply put, I live. I am a longtime survivor of AIDS. Thank you. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Jared Baeten, the Vice President of HIV Clinical Research with Gilead Sciences.
Thank you, Lonnie. Your story, your purpose is incredibly inspiring. 40 years on, it gives us such hope. To you, Lonnie, and to so many others over this 40-year epidemic, we honor you in this moment. It is truly humbling to stand here today and confront that this world has been living with HIV for 4 decades now. We have come far. We have far, far to go. We must all be accountable that you and everyone, everywhere affected by HIV have the care, the support, and the solutions that you need to survive and thrive. At Gilead, we are focused every day on what we can do to end this epidemic. Through science and through our efforts in communities across this country and around the world. We are committed to pursuing new treatment and prevention options like long-acting antivirals, and we continue to pursue the ultimate goal, a cure. Beyond the science, we partner with allies and advocates to address the root causes driving this epidemic: stigma, racism, other discrimination. Congresswoman Lee and Mayor Breed spoke of the importance of community and of on-the-ground efforts to make an impact and to help improve lives, and we echo those statements. Gilead is continually working with service organizations, government agencies, and nonprofits to help communities impacted the most by HIV today. That's why we cherish our partnership with the National AIDS Memorial. Through the Memorial's Pedro Zamora Scholarship Program, we are helping support the next generation of advocates, like Ima and Antwan, who live their passion for health and social justice. I think they said they were lined up to fly. That was the line from their poem today. They really are. And through our support of the AIDS Quilt, helping bring its 50,000 beautiful panels home to San Francisco where its first stitches were sewn, we are helping to preserve and share those stories throughout the last 40 years that have changed hearts and changed minds. The quilt, which is all around us today, it changed history. It is a symbol of activism, a passionate plea for change, a call to hear the voices, to see the pain, a call for justice. It is a demand for action, and it remains a reminder of those we have lost. Cleve Jones and Gert McMullen were here at the beginning. They are still here with the quilt today. Gert, finally referred to as the mother of the AIDS quilt, and Cleve, a visionary leader in the mold of Harvey Milk. Thank you for your passion, your leadership, and your love. Today, we look back 4 decades. Today, we look forward to a future where we can live in a world without stigma and where this epidemic ends. It is my great, great honor to pass this microphone to Cleve Jones on this important day. Thank you.
Where's Gert? Where are you, Gert? I can't see you. Where are you? Where is she? Get over here, Gert. I still can't sew. This is the woman who sewed the quilt together and has cared for it since its inception. And we would never have it without her. And this is the 6,000th block. The thought that the two of us are still alive is just beyond comprehension. I'll be brief. It's been a long program, but I just want to say that 40 years ago, I was working in the state legislature. I was hired by the Speaker of the Assembly, that wonderful man named Leo McCarthy, and inexplicably was assigned to work with the Assembly Health Committee. I say inexplicably because I knew nothing about public health issues whatsoever. And so the first thing I did was subscribe to every relevant journal I could get my hands on, and one of them, of course, was the now famous Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report out of the CDC in Atlanta. And it was there 40 years ago that I read that first few paragraphs describing this cluster of cases among gay men. And I had a sense that this was something bad. And I clipped it out and I put it on my bulletin board. And shortly after that, I got a call from Dr. Marcus Conant, who was a dermatologist at UCSF. And he was treating patients with Kaposi sarcoma. And he called me up. I was just in the process of transferring down to work in then Assemblymember Art Agnos's district office. Art served on the Ways and Means Committee, and Dr. Conant had the prescience to understand that we were going to need to raise and spend hundreds of millions of dollars, that we were going to have to provide infrastructure and services that were inconceivable at the time. And he took me to dinner at the Zuni Cafe, and he told me he thought it was sexually transmitted, a previously unidentified virus, that it somehow crippled the immune system. And I listened to him, and I thought, well, then we're all dead. 5 years later, almost everyone I knew was dead or dying or caring for someone who was dying. But out of that began a great movement that changed not just the fight against AIDS, but the way the world looked at gay people, the way we test drugs, the way patients can be part of advocacy and policy changing. And it's great here today to see people from the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, which grew out of that Kaposi Sarcoma Research and Education Foundation that had 2 little tiny rooms on the 2nd floor on Castro Street. I'm so grateful still to be part of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. I also work with Vivent and have seen firsthand the work that they've done around the country. And I too am grateful to Gilead for bringing home this quilt. So I get the great pleasure of introducing the person you've all been waiting for. And I'm not going to go on at great length. However, you know, somebody said the other day to me that we were so fortunate to have Speaker Pelosi as a supporter and an ally. And I said, well, I don't think you understand the relationship this woman has to this space and this quilt. She's not an ally. She's not a supporter. She is one of us. She is part of us. She is our family, and we are her family. And the word champion has been used repeatedly today, and I'll say it again. She hosted the very first fundraiser for the quilt in her home when everybody was still telling me it was the stupidest thing they'd ever heard of, including her. And I hope she'll tell the story of how she browbeat the Park Service into letting us unfold the quilt on the mall the first time. So it's a real honor, and with great love and appreciation, please welcome the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Cleve Jones, our hero. Isn't he wonderful? Isn't he wonderful? As a member of Congress and as Speaker, I've been introduced many times. I can't think of anything that has meant more than to hear Cleve Jones say that about being family to you. And it is about family. My daughter Christine is here. My granddaughter Bella, she's 12 now, but since she was born, she's been coming here, weeding and planting and enjoying the grove. This has always been a family affair for us, and that's why I'm so grateful to some of the folks who made this all possible. Our great ambassador, Jim Hormel, and his husband, Michael, are here, and they were part of starting all of this. Alice Russell Shapiro, is Alice still with us? Alice Russell Shapiro, her husband Billy, their family, so much a part of making this grove possible. Jack Porter, who is not with us, but we miss him so much, a part of this. We came here every year for different, let's hear for Jack Porter. We would come here, we continue to come here each year to help out, but also to, I think of no better way to celebrate an anniversary in Congress, 5 years, 10 years, in between, now 30 years in Congress, celebrating at the Grove, weeding and planting and seeing the renewal of it all and the comfort that it gives to so many people. This place is very, very special, that we should be here on this day observing 40 years, the return of the quilt. Honoring those living with AIDS brings so many things together. Now, we've had a beautiful program. I've been known in the Congress to speak for 8 hours in high heels. But I'm going to associate myself with the remarks of others who have gone before and talk about them a bit, but not 8 hours. It's still going to be morning when we leave here. So many, let me begin with where we were more than a year ago when we came together in the Library of Congress. Gert, is she a force of nature? Where is our Gert? Gert and Mike Smith and John. Of course, John, just such a great leader. And of course, Cleve Jones. With us there that day was John Lewis, because the quilt was coming from Atlanta, which he represented, to back home to San Francisco. John described what we were doing as good trouble. As good trouble. So we're honored that he's always been a part of what we've been doing in this regard. Okay, so there's so many people to acknowledge here. When we talk about Barbara Lee talking and others talking about how this all came together, and the mayor beautifully, eloquently talking about how San Francisco, and because of the nature of our community, and let's include there our 2 districts, Barbara Lee's and mine, on the Bay Bridge. So the continuation of all of this community action. So when we went forward with whatever we wanted to do in Congress, it was always based on listening to the community. Listening in terms of research. Paul Wolverding, Dr. Wolverding, are you here? Oh my gosh, is he still with us? Paul, hi Paul, oh my gosh, so wonderful. Continues to teach us so much, but as you know, we had to convince others, but it was always about whether it's research, whether it's prevention, whether it's care, that it would always be community-based. And that was the lesson of San Francisco and our experience. We took the worst bite of this wormy apple, but we had the best resources, scientifically, community-wise, and caring to deal with it. And it was the basis for the Ryan White CARE Act, the community-based solutions of the San Francisco experience. A Southerner, Henry Waxman, was the chairman, and he was wonderful in putting it all together. So when Barbara Lee talks about, what is happening in appropriations and all this, understand this. Oh, let me come to Barbara on the timetable. So in any event, when I first went to Congress and talked about HIV and AIDS, not everybody was as receptive as I had hoped that they would be. So when we went and decided we were going to have an AIDS National Grove in San Francisco, this important place, which didn't look quite like this at the time, then people said, well, why should it be in San Francisco? I said, don't even get me started. You don't even get me started. Why should it be in San Francisco? You know why. And so what we did was we put it on the bill that was changing the Presidio from a post to a park. Right through there, here we are, National Memorial Park. But imagine that they would question, that they who had resisted, they who understand. Of course, everybody by then understood because of the education that was going on in families, in communities across our country. But let's go back to the quilt. So in 1987 is when I was elected to Congress. In comes Cleve Jones to my house, and he says that he has this idea of putting a quilt together, and everybody's going to sew a quilt. I say, I'm a mother of 5. I know how to knit, crochet, hem, darn, and everything, and I never sew. Did I not say that to you? I said, who sews anymore? Nobody sews. So when he said that some of us thought a dumb idea, and he pointed to me, he was right. I was like, nobody's going to sew. Well, he was a visionary. He knew that it was a way to express grief in an artistic way. And how about Antwan and expressing hope in an artistic way? Weren't they just so wonderful? They're just so wonderful. But it is about the optic, the visual, the expression of grief in a visible way, individual way. So incredible. So then fast forward a couple years, this gigantic quilt that nobody was going to sew wants to come to Washington to be out on the mall. So we go to the Park Service and we say, we need the mall, and these are the days, and this or that. Respectfully and all that. We're going to give you a street corner, and just put a few patches there. Perhaps you mistook me for somebody who thought that was a good idea. No, we're not talking about a corner for a few patches. We're talking about the mall for the whole thing. Well, I'm going to give you the abbreviated version, even though you probably think that's too late for that. So it always keeps coming back to our hero, Cleve Jones. So a number of visits to shall we say, remove all doubt in the minds of the Park Service that this quilt was going to be on that mall. I'm not like a nothing member of Congress, by the way. You know, I'm like 2 years or something, but I spoke for the Congress of the United States. Anyway, the Democrats anyway. So, so anyway, they say, it's going to kill the grass. It's going to kill the grass. Well, yes, in order to have something that heavy on the grass, every 20 minutes, you're going to have to lift it up so that and hold it up. I said, Cleve's got the volunteers for this. All came back to our guy. Cleve, we need like thousands of volunteers to lift it up. At least that's what I'm telling them. That's what I hope. That is our plan. And I think people will be quite excited to lift up the bill, right? So because of Cleve and the army of people that had made the quilt and who were there to see the quilt and to mourn the loss of those pictures in the quilt, every 20 minutes, lift up the quilt. So then, like by the end of the week, was it ABC? ABC News has the newsmaker of the week, Cleve Jones, and they show the whole quilt on the mall. It was so spectacular. It was historic. And now today is another historic. After traveling and finding a home in Atlanta, it's come home to San Francisco, where we will honor it, well, we will protect it, and we won't kill the grass in doing so. So then a few years later, Barbara Lee comes to the Congress of the United States, and she is a brand new member. She comes in there following the footsteps of Ron Dellums, whom she had worked for, but then she was in the state Senate and the rest. So she comes to Congress. The very first day she gets there, the very first day, she has an amendment that passes on the floor to increase funding for HIV and AIDS, especially in our global responsibility. The very first day. Not to sit around and bask in the glory of that. She then gets on a plane that day and goes to Durban, South Africa for the AIDS conference, effective from the start. Now, where she was putting that money was in their foreign ops account, the foreign ops account where we do our foreign assistance and cooperation. She now chairs that committee in the Congress of the United States. She's the one to go to for the global AIDS initiatives and all of those kinds of things, and in fact, very much on the forefront in terms of COVID and our global responsibilities. And speaking globally, I asked the head of the World Health Organization, one of the first questions I asked him a year ago, more than a year ago, is how has our initiative on HIV and AIDS, what we've done for PEPFAR, been helpful in COVID? He said, absolutely, positively, very, very important. The network that was established, the science that is respected, the confidence that people have that they can go be tested because they can get drug, they can have improved maintenance of life. HIV, AIDS, PEPFAR, very important. Now, let me just give a word in a bipartisan way to President Bush. He wanted PEPFAR, the global drug initiative for HIV/AIDS. He came to me about it, and I said, we can have PEPFAR if we have it big. We want big PEPFAR. And he went for that, and he still continues as former President of the United States to support that distribution of drugs globally. And as I've traveled in Africa, and Barbara even more so, when we visited these places, these clinics and the rest, people with HIV would say to us, we would never have come in and identified ourselves as being HIV or taking the chance of finding out that we were if we didn't know that there was a possible, not cure, but improvement of the quality of life. So that takes me to my next point, which is the fight against HIV and AIDS has been a fight that has helped us not only make progress and have, I want to acknowledge Dan Bernal of my staff, who has 30 years, how many years been, Dan? 30 years living with HIV AIDS. 30 years. 30 years. In any case, and it's what we are all family here, but here's the thing. What happened with the activism with HIV and AIDS, and some of you are part of it, and some of you are part of an ever-widening circle of friends here. What happened with that was a model. Was a model of the action groups against breast cancer and all the rest followed the model of HIV/AIDS. Other, shall we say, diagnoses followed the model of that. We would never, everybody said, gee, isn't it funny how fast we got marriage equality? We wouldn't have had marriage equality at this point without the fight on HIV and AIDS. We would not have had to overturn the Don't Ask, Don't Tell without the fight with HIV and AIDS. So all of the progress that we have made in ending discrimination, but it's not all gone, but reducing discrimination and taking pride, as we do this month especially, but we always take pride. A lot of it sprang from all of the activism and the community coming together across, as a model in our city, but across the country on all of this. So I just wanted to tell you a few stories about the sewing and about lifting up the all of that. But I do want to just come back to the Grove. How many of us have been here when the pink umbrellas, so many times when families have come from all over the country, shed their tears, renewed their spirit, because that's what this is, growth, regrowth, new growth, and just in such a positive way. So when I thank Alice Russell Shapiro and Ambassador Hormel and the rest and others, and I just want to acknowledge Mike Shriver. Mike Shriver isn't here, but Mike had been the chairman of all of this at one point. I think he's watching. If he is, he gives me a regular report on his health. We love you, Mike. We all love you. And again, to each and every one of you for being here, for being there in all of this, and to understand that it is, it's not over yet. And I thought, some number of years I will say, pretty soon we're going to put this in a museum, in the dustbin of history and all that. And we just haven't gotten there yet, but we will. We made a decision that we will. And that's what was so wonderful to hear the scientists present, because science, again, we're prayerful as we began the day. And I was telling our friend from Gilead that in the Congress people will say, well, it's either faith or science. What? Either faith or science? No. Science is an answer to our prayers. And it's about faith and science. It's about faith and science. So we want to remember so many of our friends, and I know we will have the reading of the names, but I did want to say that just again about San Francisco, that so many things sprang, housing opportunities for people with HIV/AIDS. So many things came from our community to help people with HIV and AIDS, and serving again as a model for other challenges that we face. So we are really at a place. Our mayor, she has just been a model, as was said by others, to the country and how she has dealt with COVID. And I think that her strength also springs from the tradition and the standards that we have here about caring for people. People caring for people. Again, as our poets told us, not somebody talking down to us, but people springing up, community, based solutions for it all. And I'll just close. You're probably wondering, did I say that a few times already? I think I mean it this time. To say a word for President Biden. President Biden put $670 million in his budget request to end the epidemic. 670 to end the epidemic. Now, we have spent billions of dollars over the years, but this particular focus that he has is one that is a decision to end the epidemic. We began here with the messengers of hope. Weren't they lovely? Weren't they lovely? And John tells me that they are all HIV and all messengers of hope with their beautiful music. We then went to John. John is just really a blessing. He is a complete blessing in all of this. He knows his why. He knows why he's doing this. He knows what he is doing. You know, he has just always a vision and a plan and just a way to attract so much support in so many different ways. Now, when I arrived here, they said to me, we want to talk to you about what comes next. So God, Lord knows what they have in store, but we know it will be a very good thing for our country. Let us just salute how grateful we are to Gert and to Mike Smith and to Cleve Jones and to John Cunningham and to so many others, Paul Volverding, so many others who have taken us to this place on the brink of putting this thing away. What did you say, by 2030? Well, let's hopefully even sooner, Barbara, than that. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Thank you all for being part of the great, great challenge of coming together, brought together by the Quilt in the Grove on this special day, honoring people living with HIV and AIDS. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you, all of you who addressed the audience today. Your remarks were profound. We are going to now transition into the tradition of the reading of names. I invite all speakers to prepare and line up to read names. It will start with Gert and Cleve. The names will be read all afternoon, continuously through the day. I invite everybody to stay with us and/or return later for the reading of names. For those of you that are watching at home, at the conclusion of the reading of names, there will be a powerful video that will be kicked off by Dr. Anthony Fauci that will speak to long-term survivors and the struggle. So again, thank you all so much for being with us today.
Scott Lago, Steve Abeta, Joey Van Ness Ballesteros, Dan Turner, Bobby Campbell, Gary Walsh, Terry Sutton, James Bryson, Rod Shelnut, Thomas Moneypenny Boyd, Wayne Sanahan, Harry Ray, Wes Cronk, Ray Gretz, Jim Poche, James Durant, Reggie Hightower, Art Peterson, and my friend Marvin Feldman.
Roger Lyon, David Calgaro, Neil Lewis, Dan Cusick, Clark Kelly, Bob Kearns,
Coulter Colt Thomas, Alec Cunningham, Rick Velez, Corey Meese, Ken Borg, Garth Wall, Jeffrey Ingalls, James McKinley, Michael Duddy, Tom Davis, Dan Grace, Danny Lord, Brent Burns, Leonard Riley, Tony Treviso, Dan Olkowski, Peter Anson, Philip Seymour, Eric Passler, Rhett Steckling, Brad Hay, Chris Miner, and Richard Mulholland.
Cleve gave me permission to also remember his friend Marvin Feldman. I'll start with a flower girl in my wedding many years ago, Susie Paraki Roggio, my friend Scott Douglas and his partner Michael, Neil David Kelsey, David Smith Fox, H.M. Sanchez, Bill Braley, Terry Sutton, John Johnston, Bill Krause, Bill Krause, Bill Krause.
I'll start with one of our angels whose name is Angel. Monica Apodaca, Sylvia Coleman, Monica Cuervas, Pat Gonzalez, Robert Frank Limon, Jerry Parker, Linda Reyes, Rachel Senna, Shannon, Kevin Sims, Tracy, Magda Apodaca, Monica Cuervas, Shannon Soares, Linda Reyes, Maria Metter, and Reverend Mother Shapiro. May they rest in peace.
My first political consultant, Jim Rivaldo, Dick Pabish, Douglas Wright, Albert Jones, Tony Cremadas, Tom Doyle, Guy Rana, Sam Weaver, Alan Ellis, Frank Lebrico, Mike McGavran, Douglas Dickinson, Alexis Gregory Chu, John Sims, Jerry Lepresti, Roger Hostetler, George Silkworth, Bill Powell, John Riccardi, Mickey Martin, Dean Halsey, Gerald Pearson. Rest in peace.
James Onion, Bill Randalls, Darrell Wagner, John Brown, Mark Chrissy, Wyrant Floneroy, Perry George, Dennis Haney, Mark Hirano, Lance Taylor, Lavoy Thompson, Jim Franks, Andy Hammond, Joey Loza, Ed Lucas, Bruce Reynolds, John Halpern, Richard Rufo, David Hansen.
Scott Dayton, Salvador Ruiz, Pedro Zamora, Mario Lavin, David Michael Padgett, Jose Luis Santana, Paul J. Boudbois, Scott Lago, John Belskus, Harvey Maurer, Gary Harmon, Eric Bell, Alberto Julpe, Philippe Rapin, George, Terry, George, Ed Martin Riley, Patrick, Timothy Ray Runyon.
Mike Johnson, Ronnie Nelson, Larry Plazarin, Roger Lyon, Orrin Riley, Larry Casper, Harvey Wang, Michael Hatmaker, Tom Wright, Jim, Scott Holliday, Dr. Tom Waddle, Marty Schwartz, Brad Kane, Lamont Johnson, Ruben Vasquez, Philip Johnson, Roger Horwitz, Hap Martone, Scott Anderson, Max Christensen, Father Cesar, Frank.
Warm greetings to you all. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to join in participating in this year's National HIV/AIDS Long-Term Survivors Day events. Today's observance provides us with a chance to reflect on all those whom we have lost in the past 40 years from HIV/AIDS, estimated to now number over 730,000 individuals in this country. This is not just a statistic, for they were our friends, our colleagues, and our loved ones, partners, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers. The theme of this year's observance is AIDS at 40, envisioning a future we never imagined, reflecting that it was 40 years ago today that the first report of what was then a mysterious unknown disease, later to be named HIV/AIDS, was published in Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. During the subsequent 4 decades, we have seen unprecedented advances in basic and clinical research, resulting in highly safe and effective strategies in our HIV prevention and treatment toolkits. These accomplishments are the direct result of the unique, long-standing partnerships that were forged and continue today between scientists, healthcare providers, industry, and the HIV-affected community. While these successes have resulted in significant decreases in HIV incidence and mortality, as witnessed by the long-term survivors that we honor today, the HIV/AIDS pandemic is not yet over. The latest statistics indicate that there are approximately 1.2 million people with HIV in the United States. About 14% of these individuals are unaware of their infection. Additionally, there were approximately 38,000 people newly diagnosed with HIV in 2018. The majority of these new diagnoses were among young adults aged 13 to 34 years of age, especially among men who have sex with men, Blacks, African Americans, and Hispanic Latinos. The COVID-19 pandemic has added yet another challenge that we must overcome as we continue to strive to end the HIV pandemic. As has been the case for virtually everyone in this country and around the world, this has been an extraordinary, challenging, and difficult year. It has required creative and innovative approaches to both provide and access HIV prevention, treatment, and care, while healthcare systems are overwhelmed and trying to relieve the pain and suffering of those with COVID-19, including people with HIV and SARS-CoV-2 co-infection. Many of the lessons learned from responding to the HIV/AIDS pandemic will be crucial in our ending the COVID-19 pandemic. Two of these important lessons are: one, science will provide the solution to this pandemic, and two, societal divisiveness is counterproductive in a pandemic. We must not be at odds with each other, since the virus is the common enemy, not each other. An effective response to these dual pandemics requires an unprecedented, coordinated, and collaborative global effort of scientists, industry, and community partners to accelerate basic and clinical research. Ending the HIV pandemic is an achievable goal, one that will require that we continue to collectively work together in optimizing the implementation of the numerous evidence-based tools in our prevention and treatment toolkits, both in the United States and worldwide, as well as in continuing the development of new and innovative approaches, including an HIV vaccine and a cure that can be readily utilized by individuals with HIV and those at risk of infection. As we honor the long-term HIV/AIDS survivors today and remember all those we have lost, we must rededicate our commitment and continue to advance our efforts to achieving our goal of ending the HIV pandemic. Please join me now in viewing a tribute video developed by the National AIDS Memorial, which captures the stories of many long-term survivors of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. The video was filmed in the AIDS Memorial Grove. Once again, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's event. Please stay safe, and if you have not yet been vaccinated against COVID-19, please do so to protect yourself, your family and loved ones, and the entire community.
The worst thing in those days was the continual drumbeat of death and illness.
People were just dying all around us.
It just seemed like my whole existence was being wiped out.
And as an HIV positive man, I just knew that I would be next. The worst of the AIDS epidemic was in the 80s and the 90s. People were dying all around us, and it was like being dropped into a war zone.
I went to a lot of memorials, a lot of tears.
I lost all, friends, lovers, family, you name it.
I literally froze in my own place for the fear that I would be next.
I fully expected to be dead.
I could talk to no one about it. I had so much shame in the beginning.
I actually felt dying would have been the easiest thing to do, because then you wouldn't have to watch everybody dying.
In 1996, protease inhibitors came along and changed the game. People stopped dying in such huge numbers.
I believed in them because when I started them, I had 7 T cells, and 2 weeks later, I had 280.
I realized that I was going to live long enough to buy a car and be able to make all the car payments.
It sounds like it should be one of those, oh, be grateful, have a party, you're going to live. It was the exact opposite. It sent me into a tailspin.
You cannot watch that many people die. You cannot watch the injustice that we watched and not have that affect you.
I experienced a deep depression that I didn't recognize, and I didn't know how to get help for it.
Once the worst of AIDS was over, things subsided, people were moving on with their lives, though that moving on was difficult for a lot of us.
46 to 48% of us deal with depression, suicidal thoughts and tendencies,
Anxiety, lack of future orientation, not being able to imagine being an old person. It would be wrong for me to talk about how sad and how tragic and how just, confusing it was without talking about how beautifully people came together and took care of each other and formed a community that was very strong and resilient.
We had to take care of ourselves, and I think that was the tipping point, was when we began to learn how to take care of each other.
we showed the world how to handle AIDS. How do we treat AIDS patients?
I certainly honor all of the organizations that are still trying to do work with people with HIV and AIDS.
But now it's like, because we're living, and it's a fact, because we're living, there's a lot less funds devoted to these agencies.
Society in general, when the medications came, shelved us all. They wanted us to shut up and go away.
It startles me. It wasn't, 20 years ago, and people are acting like this never even happened.
We're going to go into retirement and aging in poverty, and no one's prepared.
Of all the things I planned on, the one thing I didn't plan for was being alive and thinking about retirement.
We have to show the world the way, the path, again, how to take care of elderly with AIDS.
Whatever we didn't get right in the first part of the epidemic, we can get that right this time. I am taking all of the knowledge that I have gathered and using that to try to recreate community, rebuild my life, and build the future that we're so scared of.
I'm an AIDS long-term survivor.
I'm an AIDS long-term survivor.
I am an AIDS long-term survivor.
We're still here.
We are still here.
We're still here.
We are still here.
We're still here.